Welcome to the No Fear podcast and the No Fear live broadcast. I'm your host, Tony Lauer. If you're into mindset training, performance psychology, personal development, you'll dig this new format. No Fear Live is a unique broadcast, and it's different from the No Fear podcast. We decided to go live because we wanted to create the opportunity to interact with people like you all over the world, where anyone can log in and ask questions, and in some cases, you may even get invited into the show. The great thing about the live broadcast is that it's much more personal for the listener. That's you. Remember, self-defense isn't always about a confrontation with someone else. The first and most important fight is winning the one inside your head. All right. Hey, everybody. Coach B here, and I've got a very, very, very special guest. I don't usually say very three times, but Greg Nelson is with us. Greg, welcome to the No Fear podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to this next hour and a half.
Yeah, it's cool. Most of my audience, it's been diversifying, but most of my audience, of course, are hardcore martial artists, law enforcement, military, and most should know who you are. You're one of, I consider, the OG guys, in the industry, and you're still pumping out content. You make me look bad, and I pump out a lot of content too. But you always have stuff coming out. For people who don't know who you are, I'm gonna have you do a brief background, so to speak, but it'll come out in our conversation, come out in the story. But I just want to name drop a little bit. If you've been around the martial arts for a couple of decades, Rick Fay, Dan Inosanto, Chai Sirasuti, Eric Paulson, Hickson Gracie, Pedro Sauer, and like tons of other people that have been your teachers, mentors, coaches, have become friends with you. You're truly like an OG of the martial arts, and it truly is a real pleasure to invite you here. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, and it's amazing that our paths haven't crossed over the years for as long as we've both been in the industry. So, anyways,
yeah.
Welcome to this event. I want to do how I do these is just a conversation. Perfect. And I'm hoping that people will online, if you're online, tag your friend if they're old school martial artists, and pop some questions in here and make that more interactive. Greg and I are going to talk for a little bit, and then we'll look and see the comments and see if there's any questions. So my origin story, like for getting into martial arts, was kind of interesting. I grew up in the 60s. And like every guy fought, right? Whether it was Mannix, Street to San Francisco, the original Wild Wild West, every male character solved every problem by fighting. And I was fascinated with that stuff. Like you, I wrestled as a youngster, as a competitive skier, but I got jumped. And that's what led me to the arts. I was 12 years old. I got jumped by kids a few years older than me. And there's a big difference in strength and size between a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. Went home, told my dad, and I said, Dad, I got beaten up by two guys, and I'm afraid to go to high school now. And because they said, welcome to high school, and beat me up. And so that got me started. Do you have a dramatic origin story? Something that happened? Were you a bully? Were you bullied? Did you? I know you wrestled and did gymnastics and stuff, but what got you really going with the martial arts?
I always tell people that my first both martial arts instructor, self-defense instructor, and tormentor was my older brother. He was 6 years older than me, really strong. All right, and of course, like an older brother, he was going to test, but then I was like the younger brother that kept on poking the bear. Of course. And so over time, he was not only the guy that would pin me in the blankets and give me the shots and do all that stuff, but also he was my number one defender if something came up. So we started out young, and he did, Taekwondo, not like super serious, but just did it and was a fighter. Ended up, he through college and through his growing up was a meat lugger, and just doing
Oh,
all
wow.
sorts of hard labor. I mean, meat lugger, stockbroker, business owner. Now he's a truck driver. I mean, he's been through everything, but he was kind of the guy that was always there and the one that kind of, man, I better figure out how to deal with my brother. And so
Right.
it was kind of that perfect storm of there's my instructor, but there's also my big
Nice.
older brother that's gonna push me to limits.
Nice. Does he still train, like in dabble in martial arts and stuff?
Yeah, when he comes into town, he'll jump in there. But right now, the last couple of years, he became a truck driver because he wanted to see the country and drive
Nice.
all around. So there he is.
There you go. Is he? I don't. You know, I've got two siblings, and we're close, but we're not that close in that way. Has he ever said to you, "Holy shit, Greg, I'm proud of you. Look what you've done." You have that type of relationship because you've done everything that any coach or martial artist could want to do.
Oh, yeah, definitely. He's the guy that's not only my greatest supporter, right, but he's also constantly challenging me, and still to this day, still poking back at each
Nice.
other and having fun with it. But yeah, he's he's been there through kind of everything, the thick and the thin, at the beginning and the end.
Nice, nice. That's so cool. So I alluded to this for those of you. Again, I'm assuming any of my like old school, like I know I see George Foster's on here. He's always on here. Guys, if wherever you are in the world, please say hi. We got a guy from London, New Jersey. There's 9 or 10 other of you on here. Pop in here, but when I say Greg's done everything, uh, you know, I listed some of the most famous martial arts in the world that he's trained under, and he's competed in wrestling, judo, Muay Thai, BJJ, submission grappling. Runs one of the most effective, I say effective, not just successful, schools in the world. Not just teaching everything from Jeet Kune Do to Jiu-Jitsu, but also training world-class pro fighters. And it's crazy because you've done something that few coaches have ever done. Like every martial arts school, Greg, advertises, you know, mindset, self-defense, martial arts. But if they're good at one of them, it's just one. Like you could be, and this isn't to put down arts, but if you're really, really good at Tai Chi, you probably also believe it's good for self-defense. And there's probably some guy that can kick my ass, but who's a Tai Chi master. But for the most part, we know if you do pressure testing and force on force stuff, that you're in for a big surprise if you're not doing other stuff. And what I'm getting at here is that you've been able to, like, when you look at your like the reality based component of the stuff, it's world class, and you guys train hard. And you look at the sports stuff, it's world class, and you guys train hard. How are you able to affect? Are you just a fucking unicorn, or how are you able to effectively maintain that standard for all the different disciplines? Because you track what I'm saying, because most people haven't done that.
Yeah, first and foremost, I mean, I started the martial arts because I was absolutely in love with them. I wanted to train. Obviously, growing up in the same time, you had kung fu and the ninja stuff and all that, and then it just went on. And I started reading the books with Guru Dan Inosanto and started to meet people. Then I met Rick Faye, and it was like, this is it. This is it. This is what I wanted. And then shortly after that, I met Achan Chai, and you just keep going down the list. Tim Tackett, Larry Hartzell, Pentecar Paul Dutoit, Yuri Nakamura. I grew up competing against Eric Paulson in gymnastics, and he moved out to California, and so we knew each other there. And he trained at the Kali group as well, and just a lot of people over the years. And I just loved training.
Right.
First and foremost, I love training, and I started doing all these martial arts. Filipino martial arts, Jun Fan martial arts, Pencak Silat, Wing Chun, Savat, and working with all these different people because I just wanted to become a better fighter, for one. And I was always looking for how can I take elements from each one of these arts and fit them all together and create this mosaic of of my style of fighting, and at the same time trying to figure out how can I continue on with all these training methods and all of these different arts, because when questions come at me, I want to be able to answer them from a lot of different directions, because it might be a body type, it might be a type of person, it might be a person who has a specific type of training that will relate more to one art than another. So I'd have a little bit of ammo to always be able to sit down and say, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we do this? Or do I have a student who just wants to train and get in better shape, so he doesn't want to have to go through all the pounding and the smashing? Well, I have a bunch of stuff that we have from different arts that still develop, good skill without taking a beating. So you got that ability to have the fighters there and the people that want to push it really to a high level, and then people that are maybe coming back from injury or older or maybe not as athletic, and their whole goal is just to build confidence and to have fun. So I wanted to have that kind of ability to pick and choose from all these different arts to answer the questions I needed to answer. And I just never stopped loving training all those different arts. And I've seen a lot of my, old friends that came up with the same thing, and they started just narrowing it down to, okay, I'm just going to do jujitsu, or I'm just going to do Thai boxing and maybe dabble a little bit. But for me, I just love the whole process of training all of them. And for me, ever since I was in high school and even before that, it was all the same: gymnastics, wrestling, martial arts. It was just all developing myself to be a better athlete and to be able to deal with more things. And I never saw it as, oh, I'm doing this art and that art. I'm just doing martial arts, and they're all coming together. And then it's my job to figure out how I can take what is most combative and put it in that element, and what is a training method that's going to develop a certain skill that I want to develop, and what is just fun, just for the sake of doing it and having fun.
Nice. Again, like I said earlier before the question is, a lot of people think they're doing that and they don't. And it's neat to see that. One of my questions regarding all the competition you've done, do you have like a single takeaway? What was the biggest lesson you learned from the competing? That's kind of like a vague question, because there's so many things that you can learn. But I guess where I'm going at it, let me tee it up. You're a very successful coach, mentor, and you've trained world-class fighters who are also martial artists, right? So like I've seen you working with, UFC level world-class fighters doing huba, doing, things that like you're not swinging noodles at them, and nothing wrong with that, teaching proximity sense and head movement and so on and so forth. But you've garnered the respect of them, that they trust you with some of the like body mind movements from the martial arts. And I was wondering if you could talk about what you learned competing that made you an effective coach.
Well, I think one big part of it, and you alluded to it in the beginning of your podcast, you learn to deal with you first and foremost, because when you're stepping out to compete, you put so much pressure on yourself. You have, especially like when I started out wrestling, you start out and you're looking at the guy, go, that guy weighed in at the same weight I did. He looks so huge. And you put all these things in your brain, and then you're going out there and you're looking at, it's so funny, the things that happen when you're little kids, like, oh, he's got these shoes, he must be a good wrestler.
Right.
All these goofy things that go into your mind. So you start to figure out, how do I tame my mind? How do I control that first and foremost? And I think that to this day carries over to everything that we do. Everything starts in your mind first, and figuring out, how do I deal with that animal and try to be more positive? How do I take out the negative influences that are in there? I always talk about the ants' automatic negative thoughts, and how do I smash them and replace them? And how do we use those to fuel, how can I use, something that would make somebody very anxious and use it to fuel my training, or fuel my ability to compete? And that, I think, is one of the number one things from all the different competitions, is trying to figure out, how do you deal with all the noise between your ears before you go in there?
Nice. Is this stuff that you've just intuited and picked up along the way, or did you have a mentor, somebody specifically that coached you? And the reason I ask that is, I'm a fan of combat sports, so I've not only been close to or part of some fight teams at arm's reach, doing like a little bit of consulting here and there, or in locker rooms before fights, and cage side or ring side. There's a lot of coaches who don't know much about performance psychology. They're in there, and their fighters getting their ass kicked, and it's all up here, because anybody who gets to step into an octagon or a ring has courage and skill. If they're not able to deploy what their game plan or their strategy is, it's now become a fear management mindset issue. And so I've seen corners, man, where like the guy staring at the fighter is like eyes glazed over, going, "Hey, give me something." And the guy's going, "You got to stop getting hit. You got to throw more punches." And like, no shit, Sherlock, right?
Yeah.
But so that it's a unique, rare quality. It's of course our favorite part of our stuff, hence the name of even the podcast, No Fear. Where did you get the insight? Is this, again, full circle on the question, was it intuitive? Was there a coach that you had that said, if this doesn't happen, that's not happening? Where'd all the mindset stuff come from?
Initially, the majority of my mindset training came from one of my coaches in high school, my gymnastics coach, because
nice.
There you're dealing with inanimate objects that just trash your body when you wipe out. And everything that you do, you have to do for the first time. And we always say, you fail until you don't. And then it's like, oh, great, you got it. Now let's go to another thing. You're going to fail, and you're going to crash, and you're going to fall, and you're going to get banged up and dinged up. And so a lot of that is having that ability to, okay, my body can do this. I know I can do this. I got to get up. I just got to go for it. Whatever happens, happens. And even before that, I had two coaches when I was in junior high that every time we crashed and had like epic wipeouts, they would praise us. Man, that was the best wipeout. I've never seen anybody go for that move like that and miss it so bad. That was awesome. Get up and do it again. And you're just like, okay, I will. And you got up and did it again, and you got closer, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, I could get this move. And my high school gymnastics coach, he was also my art teacher, so he had a very different way of thinking about things. But he would write me these questionnaires. How do you think before you step on the mat in wrestling? Is it different than when you step out in front of the parallel bars before you do your routine? What goes through your mind? Why? You have to amp yourself up before you wrestle? Do you amp yourself up before you do your routine? Which one does one hamper the other? If you try to get yourself amped up, you crash in gymnastics. If you try to get too mellow, you get beat in wrestling. So he was always trying to make me look into my own psyche and see, what are the differences? And there definitely was. When I was doing gymnastics, my goal was to calm myself down, visualize my routine before I got there, try to get all the, my heart rate, just relax. In wrestling, I was more about getting amped because I was always an endurance-based wrestler, endurance-based athlete, period. So my goal was to push the pedal at the beginning and my wrestling coach at the time said, if you're an endurance-based athlete, you want to become friends with fatigue, because if you're tired, the guy in front of you is dying. So you want to push yourself to the point where you're tired, and you're going to feel all that person's energy come out of their body, go into yours, and you're going to have this rebirth of energy constantly. And so it was always, those first couple of coaches in high school that really shaped how I looked at things. And really it was gymnastics, because, you have to go up there and do something for the first time. And that I'm on a high bar. When I release this high bar, I'm going to be like 9 feet in the air. There's a bar underneath me somewhere, hopefully, or I'm hitting the ground. All right. And so that was the big part of it. And then it just kind of stemmed from there, trying to find other, when I went to college, you work with sports psychologists a little bit more because they're getting you prepared, because everybody that's now in that room. Nobody wants to lose. They're not used to losing, and only one guy gets to start on that team.
Right.
And so it's always this, you're going in, you know, you're going to have a tough day. It's going to just be, you know, a dog eat dog environment, and you just got to persevere. And then when you compete, well, now you're going against other people who are doing the same thing. And now who mentally is going to be more, you know, at ease with who they are when they get on that mat, you know, and that was a huge thing. So step by step, I just started learning more from different coaches, from different martial arts, but a big part, you know, a huge part of it was my gymnastics coach at the beginning, just, you know, figuring out how to manage that fear of doing something for the first time and learn how to fail and get better at failing.
That was when you were a teenager?
Yes.
Yeah. That's amazing that you had a mentor like that, because, I mean, I grew up in Canada, so we didn't have a strong athletic program. You know, I was just talking about this on a recent podcast where, you know, almost anything you wanted to do at a kind of a more serious level was extracurricular. You had to, you know, sign up, pay, go somewhere. It wasn't part of the school system, which is a real drag. But man, were you, I don't like using the word luck, but what great opportunity for you to have somebody like that, and that you were a sponge to absorb that. Because you know, there's a story that I tell in our No Fear seminar about my ski coach, who, I was a competitive skier, you know, before one of our biggest races, asked me how I felt, and I lied to his face. I said, "I'm great, coach." And he said, "Hey, watch out. Course is getting icy over here. Watch this gate, blah, blah, blah." Anyways, I take off like a batter to hell. I catch my tip again and wipe out near the finish line. But that was the story of my ski career. Was one of the best skiers on the team. I was considered one of the best skiers in Canada at a young age. But every time I competed, I could never hit that flow state. I was always going too hard. And, you know, years later, meditating and introspecting and thinking about the psychology of fear versus the physiology of fear, I realized that it was my relationship with fear that I would ask this question, Greg. I'd go, if I'm so fucking good, like I believe I'm good, and everyone tells me I'm good. If I'm so good, why am I so scared? Nobody ever mentored me, grabbed me by the shoulders and said, "I've been coaching you now for 4 years. You haven't won a fucking race. What is going on here? I can see in practice you're killing it." But I never had anybody around me like your gymnastics coach saying, "What are you thinking? Is this working for you? Let's talk about this." And you know, I believe my athletic, I don't want to say career, but experiences. When I was wrestling, it was funny. I smiled inside when you mentioned the shoes, because I can remember being in competitions where, you know, if somebody had the latest Adidas shoe or the latest this or that, you're thinking he must be like a sponsored athlete. How the fuck did, you know? And it would get in your head. And so we would. Yeah, I make the joke now, and I say it in a much more academic way, where I talk about how we imbue skills on our opponent that they haven't yet proven. In Big Fancy 4, we look at somebody, he's bigger than us, he's got a busted nose, he's got cauliflower ears, he's wearing a tap-out shirt, and immediately we're going, "Oh, this guy must be a badass," as opposed to, he doesn't know how to block punches. That's why his nose looks like that. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, somebody gave him that shirt. Like, we immediately go, we're going to get our ass kicked. That whole psychological game is everything. And it's fascinating to me. I want to sort of pivot a little bit, but obviously in the same thing. I've watched, you know, your Instagram feed. I follow it, you know, for years. You've talked about so many things in there. There was one thing I saw a while back. It's been the last month or two. I don't know if it was an interview or something you wrote, but you talked about your time working at Target, and you know, looking for shoplifters, and you obviously didn't live in a retirement community. Like you weren't working in Target in Palm Beach, Florida, and like there's a 70-year-old guy with a walker just put some Mentos in his pocket. You're in a rough area. My questions for this, and tell any stories you want, but we know this, and I say this as a lifelong martial artist. I always tell people, learning and practicing martial arts has tons of value, but you can't confuse the practice of the complex motor skills and technique of martial arts with managing real violence. It's a completely different animal, both in how it starts, what it does to your physiology, and a lot of the moves just don't work. They're not cement friendly. Talk about that, because my real question is this: you're this diehard sponge martial artist, and then you start working doors and Target. What was the learning curve where you went, oh, I'm going to I'll round kick the guy in the head there, and he like drops you or it just doesn't work? The learning curve of how you figured out, okay, these martial arts need to be modified for the street. So I'm opening the mic's yours. Tell us about the Target days, but specifically, I need everyone listening to this, because we've got cops, military, martial artists, people in public safety listening, and all of you. If you're not a serious martial artist, you're being taught cookie cutter. A lot of you are just taught cookie cutter stuff that's saying, hey, get to 2 o'clock, grab the guy's wrist here, turn like that, and your partner's cooperating, and the fucker in the street's not going to cooperate like that. So go for it. Take it away, Greg.
Yeah, the Target years were seriously pivotal in my martial arts journey, because I started training with Rick Fay in the summer of 1983, and we were doing Kali and Thai boxing and Jean Fa martial arts. And I was coming from a wrestling background. I was wrestling at the University of Minnesota at the time. And then in 1985, I started working at Target and at Lake Street. And it's at that point in time, it was the second highest crime business establishment in all of Minnesota. And so there was a lot of action. And so from 1985 to 90, it was during the crack epidemic, and the gangs were coming in. It was kind of the Wild West. And the fact of the matter was the 80s. And so you could chase people, tackle, shackle, and grapple them, and just bring them back in. And it was probably one of the greatest training opportunities of my life, because like you said, right away you realize, wow, a little sand on the pavement, there goes your kicking. Oh, we're outside. It's raining. It's super slippery. It's night, it's ice, it's snow. I mean, you start to figure out certain things, even in the greatest of environments, don't work very well, put you off balance. And so one of the things that I think was most beneficial is the fact that I wrestled, so I could get inside, and you understand the feel and the energy and the pressure, and how to mitigate the damage inside there, and how to use their pressure against them. You feel a little bit, you're snapping them, you're pushing them, you're creating angles. And then as you start to squabble a little bit more on the pavement, you realize, okay, there's certain ways I got to land. All right. Because I pick somebody up and I throw them down. Well, I'm landing hard too.
Right.
And my bones are still going to be hitting the pavement, my elbows, my knuckles, my hands, my head. All these things happen. So you start to figure out, how do I get in there? How do I first and foremost control this clinch position, and then take the person down? And at the same time, as I'm doing that, I have to be cognizant of what's around me, because they may have buddies. There might be people that don't even know them that jump in the middle of it, because they just see something going on and they're like, oh, I got to go help this person. He's getting beat up. They don't know who's who or what.
Sure.
And so you get all these things, coming at you, and I would bring what I learned from a altercation at Target, which, I'd catch a shoplifter probably every 3.5 hours, and there were 7 of us. So they're catching them too. So we're helping them. So there's a lot of squabbling going on. And I always tell people there's a big difference between a person who's fighting to try to get away, and then a person who just turns around and says, we're going. I'm not running. We're fighting. And that's a big difference. And so, you're there, and I'd probably say about every of all the 20 people that fight to get away, 5 of them are going to turn. They're going to turn and they're going to try to fight you and they're going to try to take you out. And so I'm going, okay, this is a different story. Now we got to get control of this person, start to think, is there anybody else around me? What type of the year is it? Am I in the middle of winter? Is it raining? Is it, are we on the grass? Are we on the pavement? Are we on tile? Are we inside? Are we outside? Are we inside a car, on top of a car? I mean, everything that you could possibly imagine happened in those 5 years as far as fights happening, multiple people, tackling, holding somebody down, then getting jumped from behind. I mean, so I would take that stuff, and it was like taking information and bringing it back to the gym and then creating drills that would allow us to, okay, here's what's happening. The person, when I was grabbing their waist, they were just swinging wild. So what I want you to do is I'm going to grab your waist and I want you just to go completely nuts. Do something totally unpredictable. Don't do anything that you think you should do. Do something just wild. I want to see how we can keep our balance. When can I let go? When should I let go? Should I ever let go? I mean, can I use the clothes against them? And so you'd find all these, learning opportunities that are unrepeatable.
Right.
That's the other thing. You're never going to have that same thing again happen. But you start to understand, okay, base and balance and position and where your structure is really important. Far more important than the technique that you're doing, because if you can't hold your balance, don't have a good base, in bad position, don't have any kind of structure in how you're putting your arms, you're just going to get thrown on the ground anyways. You're going to fall down. You're going to slip. And it happened because we had other people that came in that did martial arts, and they would just get their asses kicked. And then go, you don't know how to fight. You do martial arts, but you don't know how to fight, right? You don't understand the pressure, like you're saying, and how crazy it would get. And I think a big part of it too is my mentality back then is I looked at everything, and I still do, but then everything was like a challenge. Okay, what's going to happen today? And what am I going to learn? How am I going to deal with it? And so it was like an opportunity to put yourself in a real experience that who knows what's going to happen. It's going to be super chaotic. And then afterwards, you're looking at what's happened and you're like, okay, that one, I got my nose kind of smashed. My skin's off my knuckles. I mean, okay, we got to figure it, TAR's not the same. And we got to, how do I take somebody down and control them and not have to hang on to their body and just get my skin sandpapered off by the TAR? Could I grab the clothes? This is before jiu-jitsu. And we're starting to figure out how to grab sleeves so they can't punch you. And I go, wow, it's kind of like wrestling, but you're cheating because you got all this material to grab on. Right. So we can snap them down and push them and pull them. And so it was this huge learning opportunity. The funny thing is Rick Fay worked at that same target before I did. And so he had a bunch of experiences. And so we could come back and say, okay, yeah, I had something like that. What do you think we should do? How should we break this apart? What drills could we do? And so we would, from Thai boxing, we'd figure out drills. In, trapping, we'd figure out drills. And I figured, long time ago, trapping in the open doesn't really work that well because they just run away. But when you got them against a wall or against a car and they can't run, or on the ground, now the trapping works because they're putting their hands up and you're just pulling their hands out of the way and pinning them, which then as we started fighting, we're going, well, we're against a cage. We're on the ground. We can do the same stuff that we did back in the day, but now the person can't run. So it's still evolving and it's still growing, and we're still figuring out stuff we did way back in the past and how are we going to apply it against someone who's now actually trained, not some street thug who's just potentially just a super strong dude who doesn't really care what happens to him. That's a tough dude to deal with. And, and how many, when other people jump in, it's like, okay, this guy just stole something. He's running. He's trying to get away. This guy just hit me in the head. I'm letting this guy go. He's just a thief. This guy's trying to take me out. So immediately you'd have to make these decisions on the street. Who's the worst threat at the time? And what do I got to take care of first? And is the other person really even a threat? He's just running away. No more threat. This guy who jumped me, he's the threat. And so you'd find these things right away. And also figuring out how to work in a group with partners, how to take somebody down together. Because we've all seen it where there's one guy and it's looking like 5 people are trying to take him down. They're all doing something to hold him up. They're all fighting against each other instead of, okay, and we used to flip a coin. we'd say, okay, if we go out together, oh, okay, I take the upper body. I got heads. You got tails. You're taking the legs. And so we knew that, in the 80s, when we're going to fight, if it's two of us, one of us is going for the legs automatically, the other guy's going for the upper body, and we'll just work in tandem. And so it was fun. I worked with a couple other wrestlers too, but then you'd have to trust them. Okay, hey, when I'm going for those legs, you better be on that upper body. And so we started to understand how to combine things, and it was just a great learning experience. You find out real fast how things can change. But the one thing I always tell people about this, and this is, I'm a 5th degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, been doing it a long time. All those years, I never was on my back in the guard I didn't know I was like, no, you don't want to be on your back. We're fighting to stay on top, and we're fighting for top. We're going to stay on top. And that's all there is to it. And there's no settling for being on your back and fighting. If you're on your back, you're fighting to get off your back. And so that was a big part of it too, which now plays into how we also train our fighters, because the guard is not punch proof or elbow proof or smash proof. And even if it goes to a decision, the person who wins is generally the person that's on top. And so, is the guard a valid position? Heck yeah, of course it is. Sometimes you don't have a choice. You got to go somewhere. But if you had a choice to fight off your back or stay on your back, my choice is to fight off my back and get to a position where I can maneuver and control. So all these things kind of stemmed from those Target days. And so it was a huge, huge learning experience.
What's wild is I just thinking about Target in the last 3 years, or had you saw that Lululemon employees getting fired for calling the police or trying to stop, some looter. Like I guess you grew up in the heyday, the mixed martial art era of Target. Those are great stories, and hopefully you'll put together a book one day. It sounds like you had hundreds of fights that even some of the world-class MMA guys that you coached didn't fight as much as you did. Yeah, right. You're fighting, 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes 10 times a day.
Yes.
And there was no rule meeting. There was no, I gave your instructions in the changing room and stuff like that. Did you ever encounter any serious weapon threats? I remember reading something once about a stabbing
I got stabbed. I got stabbed through my hand, so it went in here and came out the other side, and I got stabbed in my arm. I think at one point, every male employee that worked at the Target got stabbed at least once somewhere. And so there was a lot of that going on. But I always tell people this too. It's like, because you get focused on, trying to get to the person. Both times when I got stabbed through my hand, when I got stabbed in my arm, and I asked the other people, did you see the knife? Nope. It just comes out of nowhere. And all of a sudden you're like, where'd this blood from? I remember when I was trying to hold this guy, we tackled him, and he's kind of faking going in and out of consciousness, and he's dropping down, he'd come back up. And I never saw any of this because you're focusing on holding him. But apparently when he fell down, because someone else on the outside saw him, he said, yeah, he fell down, and he opened up the knife in his hand. It was like a cheap ass $4.95 brass wood handled knife. Stabs you just as good as a fancy one.
Sure.
And opens it up and swings. And I thought he was punching me. So I blocked the punch, kind of push him away. And then I see blood. So the first thing I'm going, did he hit me? Can't believe the guy hit me. And then I saw my hand, and there was bleeding. And then I look at him, and I could see the knife. And that's the day that all those cool disarms did not look so cool anymore. Mm-hmm. I was like, dude, this guy's really trying to stab me. So initially for a little, I don't even know how long I was in that little red zone, but I went whoops, and I took out my knife, and then I heard one of my coworkers going, Greg, put it away, because this is no longer self-defense if you're in a knife fight in a parking lot. And so then it's like I snapped out of it, and I put my knife back in my pocket, and then I looked, and I got a shopping cart, and I ended up taking the guy out with a shopping cart. Mm-hmm. Hitting him, and then I pinned him against the door. And so it was a crazy fight. And then getting on the ground and controlling the knife, and that that was the real experience where I learned control, and controlling the knife arm is the most important thing in a situation like that. All those cool disarms where you're letting that arm go is just now another shot for the guy to stab you some more. And so that was a huge, huge experience. And the other thing too is how, people think you're just going to disarm a knife. Well, blood is like oil and slippery. And all of a sudden everything's slippery and you can't hold the person because there's blood all over the place. And now you're going to think you're going to strip the knife out of his hand and he's hanging onto that thing with all his adrenaline going nuts. Yeah. So that was a big part of my, weapons training and figuring out, okay, how do I get control? What's the best control? How do I tie up their arms? And of course you're also thinking about, okay, there's, Filipino martial arts are dealing with weapons. So they're also dealing with, okay, if we're going to get cut, where's a better place to get cut instead of just, And so we brought a little bit more realism to our weapons training. And then, then the next time was like a scissors. I got stabbed with the scissors. And the guy took like a carpet cutter after me. And that one was different because I remember I'd always say some guy would be talking smack to you. And I'd say, well, I'm checking the trailers every night at 10 o'clock in the back. If you got something to tell me there. Dude showed up. And he had a carpet, like one of those carpet knives. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm looking around and there's a broken stack of pallets. So I smash it. I break it off. I have a stick about this long. And I remember just moving around and just wham, whacking his hand. And I still remember, it's like certain things stick out, but his finger got broken straight up in the air like this. He had a big gash across his arm. So then I'm like, okay, well, then I cuffed him up to stop the bleeding. And I'm like, man, what if that pallet wasn't there? This guy was a nut. He showed up. He wanted to do damage. And so it's like, okay, learning experience. Don't tell people to meet at night behind Target anymore.
Right.
Let's try to avoid those situations. They're going to come. We don't need to ask for them.
That is nuts. It was interesting to hear you mention about tying up the arm limb, because in my experimentation and researching, and I always try to create principles around the programs. So we talk about, if you're doing any scenario training, you want it to be realistic, you want it to be relevant, and you want to, as safely as you can, scale it for rigor so that you start to experience stamina, endurance, and the pressure of the challenges of general physical preparedness. Do I have the coordination, the agility, the balance, the stamina? And those are things that I don't know if you remember the name Marco Lala. He was also OG Kyokushinkai fighter, but Marco's a buddy of mine, and I think he said one of my favorite lines. I've been quoting him for 30 years now. You can't fake endurance. You can fake confidence, but you can't fake endurance, and that's one thing that those fights for sure taught you. Like the Lombardi line: fatigue makes cowards of us all. But that tying up is huge. In our weapon stuff, we talk about this, what we call the 3 C's: clear, control, counter. Clear yourself from the trajectory of the weapon, control the arm limb, and then counter. And there's so many myths around gun disarms and weapon control. And my buddy Tim Larkin just posted something interesting where a guy gets, I don't know if you saw it, I just shared it, but a guy comes in, goes to rob a guy, and he's cooperating, and suddenly the robber takes his eyes off of the victim as he's rifling through to grab some money, and this guy picks up, it looks like, I think it's at the back of a restaurant, looks like a rolling pin for, that you cook with. And all of a sudden, I don't have a prop here, but all of a sudden the guy's like heads down, and you see this guy go wham, and he hits the guy over the head and just stuns him. The guy like sits back, falls to the ground, and the gun drops on the ground. And the guy's stunned for a second, and then the intended victim drops this blunt object and goes to reach for the gun, but he's slipping on a slippery floor, and they wrestle for it a little bit, and then the guy takes off. And Tim's contention was, you had the guy stunned, you had some fucking big thing in your hand.
Just
Like you should have immediately nailed him again and put him out because he was stunned. And it was amazing because some of the comments on my page were, I disagree, I'd go for the gun because of this and this and this. And it's like, and this is, I look at that as the danger purported by most martial arts who confuse technical with tactical. And I always tell people, don't confuse technical with tactical, always be tactical. But I love all of these stories. And you absolutely need to write a book one day. That'd be insane. Let me look here. I have a bunch of questions for you. Here's an interesting one because I've seen a lot of coaches who they're sitting in a chair, they're 70 pounds overweight, they're leaning on the ropes, yelling at people. You're still in there I appreciated the thing, I think you posted it yesterday, where you look like you're being electrocuted. One of your students is drilling you in the head, your fucking hair's all over the place. You're still in there mixing it up. You're still there as that 14-year-old kid exploring martial arts, doing that, but you're also coaching. And I knew for me, and it was because of, and this is part of what developed the whole No Fear program, is I never liked competition, wrestling, gymnastics, tennis, skiing. I never liked it because I never had, I'll just say this, I never had coaches, I had trainers. And I differentiate the difference as this. Like your teacher, your trainer tells you what to do. Go over here, run this, do this, pick this up, do this 10 times, blah, blah, blah. The coach is always about performance. The coach might have the skill to say, hey, I want you to put your thumb over here. I want you to, here's a hook grip when you're doing your deadlift. Move your feet wider. The coach maybe is giving you some of the technicalities that'll help the body's like engineering work better. But it's only, so that's what I call the technician part, the trainer. The coach is all about psychology. The coach is what your gymnastics coach was. And I make this joke, I told you my skiing story, that my ski coach wasn't a coach, he was a ski instructor. He never pulled me aside, put his arm around me and said, hey kid, what the fuck's going on? Like, have you noticed that you wipe out like every time there's a race? And again, it was always like, man, that was so close. You were going so fast, and people could see it. It was almost like when you would wipe out in gymnastics. The difference is I didn't wipe out in practice. I was acing everything because I didn't have the pressure of worrying about the victory or letting down my parents and all that. So where I'm going with this is I knew that I would always be a better coach than I would be a fighter. And that led to my decades exploring the difference between the psychology of fear and the physiology of fear, where everyone talks about fight, flight, freeze, blah, blah. I was more into how do I enhance your performance? And so I knew when I was like 15 years old that I wanted to teach. And I also knew this, I heard this years later, it's a Latin expression. It goes, qui docet decet, those who teach learn. And I knew that every time I taught, and this is one of the reasons why I was always so passionate. An hour class was always 2 hours. 3 hours seminar was always 5 hours. I knew that the more I taught, the more competent I got. Not confident, competent. And so I would always thank my audience, my student, for the opportunity to teach, because I knew that it was forcing me to show up and learn more. So my question of all that preamble and all the substance behind that is, when did you know that you wanted to coach, or did it happen almost accidentally because, like you had so many sparring partners and training partners that someone said, hey, Greg, I want to fight in this competition. Would you work my corner? Like, what was that evolution? Because you've worked with world champions and you just cornered last weekend, didn't you?
Yeah, we're getting cornering, and we just had the UFC the other
Yeah.
week, another one coming up. Yeah, so
Yeah. So
always
I mean,
been
you're
there.
still there. And a lot of people aren't good at it, like I alluded to earlier. But was it just a natural thing you found yourself doing, or did you go, I love coaching?
It was kind of the process. When I first opened up my school, I was training with Rick Fay at the Minnesota College Group, but I was starting to get into the wrestling mindset, but for Thai boxing. I wanted to compete. I wanted to test it. I wanted to put it to the so I and talked to Rick, and I was gonna open up my school, and I was gonna focus more on training and competing and still do the other martial arts. But my focus was really wanting to develop and build myself up to go fight my first Thai boxing fight, and then the Shudo fights, and then grappling. And it was basically an extension of my wrestling. So I ended up having a bunch of people that had that same mindset. Some of them came over from Rick School who wanted to also train and fight. And that was the beginning group. And then my whole mindset was, I want these people around me right now. I had a 40-hour a week job. So I was working so I could pay my rent, so I could have people come in that wanted to fight and wanted to train to fight. And so then when the fight started happening, I think my first fight, I was also cornering a fight. So
Huh.
I cornered a fight because that's what we did. We trained each other, we pushed each other. I kind of led the group. Here's what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do today. And then it just kind of built up from there, and we started getting more competitors, more fighters. And then I remember my last Thai boxing fight where my wife at the time said, "You got to make a decision, one or the other," because I cornered 4 fights and then fought the headliner and fought the headline fight.
Nice.
And my mindset was like, yeah, but you're in the corner just giving positive reinforcement and keep your hands up, move around. All right, that's it. And then, okay, breathe. So you didn't have to sit in the back thinking.
Right.
And so it ended up working out really well for me. But at the same time, you get done with that night, you're just like, man,
Sure.
that was an emotional and physical and mental just vacuum just coming out. And then trying to train everybody and then trying to also compete was that was a little bit tougher. But for me, I loved training, still love training. And comes back to also way back, I was going to bring this up earlier, another person that was kind of instrumental, never met him, but I read his book, was Dan Millman, The Way of the
Okay.
Peaceful
Sure.
Warrior.
Yeah, me too.
Yes. And
Loved
so he was a gymnast and a martial arts guy. So I'm like, God, this is like me. And I read that book, and it's like, yeah, we got to connect the mind, the body, the soul, the spirit. Everything has got to be connected. And so those books are also something that kind of shaped the way I looked at training. And so and one of his expressions was, training is the heart of the athletic experience.
Mm.
And so I kind of use the same thing and say training is the heart and soul of the martial arts experience, right? You're training, you're trying to get better, you're always pushing yourself, learning, continuing to grow, taking things that you've learned or that you've cornered people and they've done, and how do we bring that back into the academy to help other people develop their skill. So I always liked teaching. I started a school because I wanted to teach martial art. I wanted to develop fighters. I wanted to build people up. And then over time, it was funny how the coming from a fight oriented school, then all of a sudden regular people started coming in who weren't fighters. I'm like, oh, how am I going to deal with this person? And then I remember it's like people would come in and just be shaking watching us train. And I'm like, gosh, I maybe have to have a little bit of a ramp, because our old trial program is, hey, you make it through the first week, you're good to go.
Right. Let's go light.
Yeah, let's go light. And that was tough back then, and so I started kind of steering myself more towards the coaching thing, because I started getting more fighters. And then it was kind of the natural progression after wrestling for so long, competing and doing these other things. It was just it was kind of time to shift that mindset to trying to develop other fighters and building people up themselves. And then realizing, man, if you're going to be a coach and a trainer, there's a lot of time involved. You got to take one person, you got to give yourself to that person for that amount of time. And then you got another person, and you got another person. And at the same time, you're training, but it's really hard to be a high level athlete and then also be a high level coach, because you're just giving so much energy to the other people. And you have to be somewhat selfish if you're going to be a fighter. You have to have that time where this is about me. I got to go in there and get my face punched in. All right. And body kicked and slammed and potentially submitted and smashed. Man, if I'm dividing my attention and my training to also coach, that's going to take energy away, and energy is it's not limitless.
Sure.
We got so much. And so it was kind of a mindset that I started to have as I started having these younger fighters coming in, and they're like, I go, yeah, this guy's got it. I got to, I'm still training these other martial arts, and I really want to develop them. I want to see how far we can pick those people up. And then that was kind of the veer off. And I started just continuing to teach, but I was always sparring and always grappling and always in the middle of the training. And so that was kind of where I got my fix to, okay, I can still be really competitive because I have a bunch of competitive guys around me, and you're walking out of there and you're like, man, this felt like a fight today. And I was also doing some really high level demonstrations with my old training partner, David Leach, who's now, he's now a movie director in Hollywood, and they started out doing all stunts and fight choreography. And he's one of the co-owners of 8711. If you watch Nobody, Atomic Blonde, just hundreds of action movies. Those are the guys that do it. All those raw, Born Ultimatum, all those raw fight scenes, they brought realistic fights. And part of it was how we did our demo. We did live blade. I mean, they weren't sharp, but they were like saw blades, because we're hitting these steel swords back and forth, and everything was full contact. And so we brought these demos up to a super high level, and then we did them in front of hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. And that was like getting that same feeling of, okay, we got to go out there. And a couple of times I missed, and I got cut, and blood's flying everywhere, and you just keep going till the demo's over. And so that was where I got that fix there too. He ended up, David ended up going out to Hollywood and just running that gamut all the way up to, now they own a production company and doing all the high level stunts and directing movies. And I stayed on the martial arts end of things. And last part of the question that I had no control over is when I got cancer. That just took everything out. Now I couldn't fight. Now the fight was all within. Right. Now the fight was 100% me dealing with that. And when I came back, I didn't have, I was 37, so I was still young, but it was now I had to recover, and I had to come back and didn't have the same athleticism as I had before my cancer. And it also taught me how to teach better, because now I had to relearn how to do all these things that I could just naturally do before. And so I started learning tricks on how to figure out how to move. So when someone come up and did the shrimp move on the ground, and their feet move and their body does it, and I go, I get it. I was there. So here's a little trick. Here's some more tricks. And I got a little bit more empathetic to people who weren't natural athletes, who came into my school wanting to just learn how to move and build that confidence and be a little bit more athletic, and wanted to feel confident and just wanted to do something, because they just felt like, man, the world is against them. And I'm like, yeah, I can kind of see that. And I understand it. And so it gave me a different mindset. And that's when the school really started to grow as well, because now we're taking in all sorts of people, and we tried to make the ramp that, like, my mom, who's 80, could come in and do a trial program and make the decision whether she wanted to do it or not. And it wouldn't be because she was getting beat out of there. So that was a big thing. So there was a lot of things that really drove me to become a coach. But after the cancer, then it was just 100%. Now I'm just coaching, period. End of story. Coaching, teaching, being the classroom instructor, running the school. And that was where my energy went. And then still training and going to seminars, because I love it.
Mm-hmm. That's an amazing story, man. Amazing legacy. Amazing. You're a warrior through and through. I mean that, the the health stuff is the most formidable adversary we can face. Anyone who's been through any type of chronic debilitating stuff, it's so easy. It's so easy just to have that get inside your head. So uh, I'm uh, I'm happy for you without knowing all the details, but it just adds to that legacy. And I love how you connected that to it made you a better coach. It gave you that empathy because it's you know there's a lot of fight gyms where you get the clicks, right?
Mhm.
Those are the goofballs there. These are the fighters there. These are the wannabe fighters, as opposed to kind of a real community, a real tribe, which is something I sense at your place. And you've trained, from back in the day, Dave Monet, Pat Barry, Sean Shirk, Brock Larson, Rose, and you got 30 other world-class fighters in that. Um, what percentage of people were just training with you versus sought you out, just knew about you and sought you out? Like, did I guess how many of them were students that said, you know what, coach, like let's do this, versus somebody is calling up and going, hey, I want Greg in my corner, train me for this fight.
I think the vast majority of the fighters kind of found their way there. They were like, I want to go there. That's where this person is trained. Some of them, when we first were starting, like with Dave Monet, we knew that we wanted to fight, but fighting wasn't really going on, right?
Right.
So we started out fighting at these local events that were so small and piddly, but it was like that was the thing, and there wasn't
Right.
money involved. Remember Sean Shirk, his first big tournament, 8-man tournament. He had to pay $85. We had to drive down to Iowa, get our own hotel to fight in this thing, but that's what we want. That's what the guys wanted to do. They wanted that challenge, all right. And there just wasn't the money in there, but it wasn't about the money. It was about learning how to fight and getting into this new thing, and that just kept going. I remember I just said this the other day. My first UFC at corner was UFC 24, and then now it's still got one in like 5 weeks I'm doing, and now I got bare knuckle guys, and now I got competitors in Thai boxing and Glory, and so you're still doing it, but it was like, those guys, the majority of them kind of came in and wanted the coaching. They already had made the decision they wanted to fight and go. And that especially was like with Rose and Brock Lesnar and Brock Larson. He would drive down from Brainerd, which is like a 2.5-hour drive to come in. And, other people would fly out and move to Minnesota and start training. But my whole thing was, okay, if you're going to train, I want you also train in the classes. I want you to train and be part of the school, because that's where, when I always make this big distinction between the classroom and training sessions. The classroom is where we break down the nitty-gritty details, because we're dealing with everybody. Hey, let's turn that foot a little bit more. Let's get the details. Let's learn how to step and slide correctly. When it's training time, it's like, okay, now we're going to put things to the test. This is training, right? We're doing glove drills, but then we're going to spar. We're doing takedowns, but then we're going to live wrestle. We're going to do it's training. And now that made it different, because now only the real competitors could be in the training sessions. Couldn't have students that were just coming there and even good students, but they'd never fought. They'd never been pressure tested. We couldn't throw them in there. And so then we started having our own in-house smokers, where students would fight students, and we'd kind of, have our instructors being referees, and they stop it a little sooner if a person got stunned a little bit. But then all of a sudden we started getting more people. Hey, I think I want to compete with the team. Okay. So then we started building them up within the school as we started getting a little bigger, a little bit more people to draw from.
Very, very cool. How big is your school?
I have about right now 400 students.
Wow, that's significant. I never, when I was running my school, I never had more than 80 or 90. But that's significant. Okay, let's pivot and begin to wind down here. This is something that it's interesting, like listening to you. Street weapons, multiple martial arts, coaching, fighting, competing, and if we didn't think of mixed martial arts as a sport, right? So in 19, I guess obviously I'm assuming Bruce Lee was a spiritual guide to you as he was me and everyone else certainly back in those days. He's still iconic to this day, but Bruce Lee was a mixed martial artist, right? Yes. There were a lot of people dabbling in different things. The origins of Kajikempo, what you were doing in Target was mixed martial arts, right? I after I got jumped and I started doing Taekwondo, I had some people that just wanted to work out and learn. Well, we naturally, when someone hits you with a body shot or you get scared, you grab them, right? And so suddenly my wrestling was coming into, and I love boxing. So you'd push somebody away and try and punch them in the face. And next thing you know, you're wrestling and boxing and kicking, and that's mixed martial arts. So a lot of us were practicing what is mixed martial arts. But now today, when you say mixed martial arts, people think UFC, Bellator, that type of thing. What's you have a philosophy or an approach you call total mixed martial arts. Share that with my audience a little bit.
Well, for me, when I talk about the total mixed martial arts, I'm not just talking about what happens inside an octagon. The total mixed martial arts is all the techniques, tools, and training methods from anywhere that's going to help develop my overall skill, athleticism, the tactical mindset. It doesn't matter if it's coming from, like you're saying, doing a lot of hubad with rows, just a hand motion drill, or doing Wing Chun. And then people are like, man, I can't get to your collar. Once you touch my arm, it's just like you're guiding it wherever it wants to go. And they go, how'd you develop that? And I go, well, I did a lot of Wing Chun. Wing Chun's not fighting. I go, well, you just couldn't get my collar. All I needed is that part of it. I didn't have to show you Silam Dao and how to do the dummy form. I said, but because you're not willing to dig into it that deep, you're never going to get it. You're going to have to go somewhere else. And so to me, the total mixed martial art is taking everything I can from all the different, training methods that I've learned over the years, all the different, techniques from all the different martial arts, the mindset that I've developed from athleticism, from all the athletics I've done, be it wrestling or gymnastics, the competitive aspect of things. And then having the ability, like I was alluding to before, is when someone has a question about something, I'm like, okay, this position, this is really like it's Silat, and it's like, it doesn't seem like it would apply anywhere, but right here, it's the perfect application. We're against a cage. They can't move their shoulders. They're stuck. And now we can use this sweep that out in the middle of the floor would never work. In wrestling, it would never work. But because of the situation we're in right now, this is a good, a viable option. Now, if I didn't have that ability or have that training, I would have had to just go and we'd start to, I don't know, let's try this, let's try that, which we still do. We constantly are doing that. But usually when it's let's try this, let's try that, there's some sort of a foundation there from somewhere.
Right.
And it allows me to immediately draw something from inside my schizophrenic brain. Oh, that's from this. That's from this. Let's go over here. And then I have to kind of look at the person I'm working with and say, okay, that's probably not going to work so well, but this is going to work. And so then I bring that into the mix. And so having that ability to draw from so many different sources allows me to immediately help a person, regardless if they're fighting or not, or not fighting. It just gives me more ammo to choose from. And so that
Amazing.
the total mixed martial arts is that philosophy that just allows me to grab from all those different things that I'm still training because I enjoy training, and then put them together. And it's really kind of coming out in now where we're doing a lot of firearms training, where we're grappling a ton on the ground with a pistol on or wherever, and you realize things change real fast when somebody knows you have a gun and you're doing normal techniques, and all of a sudden you just take your gun, and it's like, whoa, I didn't know that happened. So we do a lot of testing where we have really good jujitsu guys, and then we have a guy with a gun on, and they grapple, and they'll do their normal stuff, which competitively would do great. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, as soon as I got to your neck, you just shot me. You go, yeah, you could have killed me. It's a different game. And so they're like, whoa, I never thought about that. And when I started doing a lot more gun grappling, all of a sudden I found that my defense on the ground got way better, because now I had to focus about defending that side of my body and keeping my elbows in and not letting anybody get under my arm, be able to get to my side, get to my hips, control my hips, because on my hips are a firearm. And so it then made me think differently about my defense and on the ground, and how do I focus on what side. And I was like, okay, what if I had a gun on both sides? Now I'd really have to defend. And so that mindset of just expanding our awareness of different things and putting ourselves in these different scenarios allows me to now take that stuff that I learned, that's firearm training, then bring it into the fight. And how does that apply? And that's kind of I think where one of my biggest gifts happens to be is, how do I take something from like Hubad or Wing Chun and then bring it right into the fight world really fast. And just because of all those years of training and being able to dissect that movement for that one little piece that we need right there. And so that's why I talk about the total mixed martial arts.
Love it. Okay, a couple of wrap-up questions, and then we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. This is just kind of give you a no comment, yes, no, could be short. I mean, you've been around forever. What's your pet peeve about the martial art or self-defense industry, or do you have one?
All the bullshit. There's so much bullshit out there as far as this technique, that technique. And you see it, as you talked about earlier, you can see right away that person's never pressure tested it. That you can see it. And to me, it's like, if you're not willing to go in and put yourself a little bit on that chopping block and try it and really contest it, it's a fantasy world.
Good. Agreed. Completely diametrically opposed. What's your favorite thing about the martial art world or self-defense industry?
Well, the martial arts is just the ability to train your mind, your body, your emotions, your spirit to become just a better, more effective human being. And the self-defense is the ability to walk with confidence, knowing that you have tested a lot of things, tried a lot of things, and have put yourself in a lot of situations so that if something happens, I'm going to be far more prepared than someone who hasn't taken those chances and those adventures.
Nice. I love that answer. This is a weird one. I don't know that I've ever asked anyone this. Maybe I asked Tim right in the beginning, one of the first episodes, but martial arts has been your whole life, mostly. If there was no more violence in the world and you couldn't do martial arts for whatever reason, they just, the globalist powers that be that's made the world insane recently banned all martial arts. And of course, we would be teaching underground if that were the case. But in a hypothetical situation, if you weren't teaching martial arts or couldn't teach martial arts, what do you think you'd be doing?
I'd probably be some sort of a coach, like a mindset coach.
Okay, good. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know, if secretly were a guitarist or, everyone's got like stuff behind them. They go, I always want to be a doctor, but I'm a fighter or,
Mhm.
or whatever. But coaching's good. Coaching's good. Okay. Let's take a scan and see questions. This one you may or may not have an answer to. Gentleman asks us questions about karambits. So it's effective for self-defense. He's a trail runner, hiker, considering one for protection. Thoughts on the karambit?
Um, I think obviously any kind of a bladed thing, that's a tricky situation because you to pull out a blade and what's it used for? You got to gut somebody. You got to chop them up. And the karambit, obviously, it's how you're going to hold it. How well can you get to it? And then do you have the mindset to start chopping somebody up? That's one thing with like the knife community. They wear all these belts and they have 15 knives on them and they're doing all this technique. It's like, it's great, but do you have the mindset to actually start chopping somebody up?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing with any kind of like a blade. It's like, man, that's a tricky thing because at what point do you start stabbing somebody?
Yeah. And if you're thinking about protection here, is it, for a bear, for a cougar? Is it for a couple of guys on, you know, like maybe getting, mugged? And you need to understand, you don't just pull a knife. That could escalate things.
Mm-hmm.
If they mean, obviously, if it's a deadly force encounter, but you don't want to just get I'll just put this back up here so people know what we're talking about. You don't want it to lead to the point what Greg said. There's a lot of people who, they do all the stuff outside the ring. They get in the ring and they're running around and they can't strike because it never occurred to them that collision between two spirits is emotional, psychological. You can do the punch and the kick outside or have the knife or the gun outside. And there's even there was a book written years ago, I think right after World War II, The Fog of War, that you could be trained. You have your firearm, there's people shooting at you. And there was a significant number of military personnel that could not shoot or shot high or shot low because they couldn't shoot another human when it came down to it. And that research actually inspired a completely different training for soldiers, preparing them for. So mindset thing, huge. And then, the karambit is a particular style of knife that makes it even more of a challenge than just having a fixed blade.
Yeah. I think too, like a lot of the firearms training that we do with Todd Fosse, Integrated Defense Strategies. He has this little moniker. We're not gunfighters. We're fighters that happen to have a gun.
Nice.
Because once you pull the gun out, it's a different world now. But if I learn how to fight, maybe all I need to do is be able to fight to get away. Now I don't have to pull a gun. I don't have to do anything of that nature. I know how to fight, and I don't have to go to something external like a knife or something. I have to immediately have that mindset that once you attack me, you're getting all or none. It's like, boom, I'm going. And I have to know, is my goal to escape or is it to take this human being out? Most of the time it's self-defense. It's to try to escape.
Yeah. Yeah. Gang, you've heard me say this over and over again, but force must always parallel danger. You're not just doing something because you wanted to do it, or, well, that's what I was taught to do. You got to make decisions in real time. And a good exercise for everybody, and all our law enforcement friends listening to this understand this, but take any scenario, and it could be somebody grabbing you, it could be somebody swinging at you, it could be somebody threatening you, and force yourself to contemplate different options from running. And I always say this, and guys have a hard time with this. It takes courage to walk away from a confrontation. Your pride and your ego are drawing you in there. Your whatever narrative you're playing is drawing you in there. And in our world where people are fucking nuts and people are even the nicest thing is we live in a litigious world. Big fancy word for everyone's suing everyone. Why would you fucking want to get sued because of an altercation? Friday night you cut somebody off by accident or whatever. But most people, I've told this story before, where we were doing scenario training. It was the 80s, and I told everybody, okay, the confrontation is going to happen at this end of the school. As soon as you can break contact, I want you to sprint away. And if you get to where the juice bar is about 30 feet away, that was safe haven. That was, an exit, a cop, a bouncer. And gentleman puts his hand up. Larry looks at me and he says, hey, with all due respect, Mr. Blauer, we came here to learn how to fight. I think we all know how to run. And I said to him, Larry, the fact that you won't even entertain running in a scenario means you're probably not going to run in the street. This isn't about the biomechanics of running. It's about making a decision. And we would do that stuff like back, even my videotapes for Panther Productions that we released in the 80s, we would have drills where it would be de-escalation, quick hit, and then fuck off to break contact. And it was really counterintuitive for like the sparring mindset or the self-defense mindset. So great stuff, man. I learned a lot, certainly about you, the man, the myth, the legend. It's so good to meet you finally. I've been inspired by your work for years, all the people that you've inspired and coached, and the fact that you're still up there posting shit every day, showing us old timers keep moving. Greg, thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience? And we'll at least stick any type of contact information up for people. Obviously, people can drop into your gym, your dojo, your martial arts studio. If you're traveling, check it out. If you're not following Greg online, he's very irreverent, from serious stuff to fucking funny shit. So that's always refreshing. You're not like walking around with an entourage taking yourself deadly seriously like some people, in the arts. So, but anything you want to share?
Well, my biggest thing is, especially for martial artists and people that are teaching, my goal is to be an example of the benefits of training. Why am I doing this stuff? Like you talked about earlier, the guy that's, overweight, sitting there telling everybody what to do, he's going to have the biggest battle with himself and his health. To me, it's like, I want to be healthy. I want to do the martial arts. I want to do my training because it makes me feel better, makes me healthier. You get to be an example. One of the things that we have at our school is opera non verba, deeds, not words. So instead of me just yapping about it, I want them to be able to look over and say, wow, he's doing that. He's still doing that. I can do that. And, I have one of the greatest examples of Guru Daniel Nasanto. He's 85, 80, and he still teaches every single day at his school. I remember I was just out in California at the CSW camp with Eric Paulson. We were teaching out there, and I was like, well, I wasn't able to see Guru Dan because he was in Minnesota when I was out in California.
Crazy.
But I still want to go visit the Inosanto Academy. So I drove out there on the Monday morning, and guess who was teaching class? Guru Dan at 11:30 in the morning after teaching a seminar in Minnesota over the weekend. And I'm like, geez, that's what I want to do. I want to be that. I want to be the person that teaches and be able to affect people's lives until not. And I think that's also what keeps him going, because he's doing what he loves, and what he's found that builds him up is that ability to go out and just keep teaching and keep training and keep moving. And he told me a long time ago, once you stop, that's when things start to get bad. So it's just, my thing is to keep training, have fun, and kind of paraphrasing from Dan Millman, training is the heart and soul of the martial arts. It's the heart and soul of athletics. It's the heart and soul of who we want to be as a healthy person. I
love it. Mr. Nelson, thank you so much. Thank you for all your work, your contribution. Glad to have finally connected. We've known each other online and messaged over the years, but this is our first time face to face. I look forward to meeting you in person, sir.
Definitely. Like I said earlier before we got on, I had the big stack of VHS tapes of all the old training in the black casing and all that. Yes, and I remember put them in, and then I'd look at what you're doing and how could I revamp that or use it directly into our training. So yeah, it's funny how for all these years knowing each other, been in the same circles, but never have physically. But maybe
better late than never. I appreciate that. Stand by. I'm going to end the broadcast. Thank you everyone for listening. Make sure that you tag and share and let your other martial arts. I know a lot of people are working during the day, but this is a great interview to share with your martial arts family. Greg, hang on, stay with me in the background. I want to say goodbye.